Welcome back to the And I Hate podcast, a forum to discuss and combat student hate. Today we are here with Yasmin Ibrahim, a junior in high school. Yasmin is a Muslim student who has a unique and well-informed perspective on Islamophobia and seeks to advocate for those marginalized, especially during the Israel-Palestine conflict. So, hi Yasmin, I'm so happy to have you here. We've actually known each other since kindergarten, which is crazy that that's like been so long. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Definitely did not do you justice in that introduction. So go ahead and give us
No,
a
no, you're all good.
hi.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm really excited to kind of share my perspective and talk a little bit more about this because I've actually been having discussions about this a lot with my friends and stuff lately. So I'm excited to get on like a channel and talk about it more.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh wait, sorry. No,
no,
keep
you're
going with that bio.
yeah, I was just gonna say I am a junior in high school. I most recently attended Mission Hills High School. Before that, I was at Torrey Pines High School. And now I do school online actually. And yeah, proud Muslim Arab student. It's a big part of my identity. And yeah, I think that's great. I'm almost 17 years old. What else? Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, your birthday's in January, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very exciting. I didn't know that you were doing online school. That's cool.
Sorry, I think it moved. My bad. When you swipe the screen, it like does a weird thing.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so speaking about like your cultural background, how has your life been affected by a lot of this recent like Islamophobia and a lot of like American ideas of what the Middle East is?
Yeah. So I think to answer your first question about how my life has been affected, I've definitely, in numerous ways, honestly. I feel like generally speaking, whenever an issue tends to come up in the Middle East, I feel like once America, gets word of it, what typically tends to happen is that narrative or this like the stereotypes that we already know that are have been imposed on Arabs and Arab Americans for a long time, and Muslims by extension, because people typically tend to think that they're synonymous. To clarify, for those who don't know, being Arab is the like ethnicity, and being Muslim is the religion in which if you identify with Islam, you're a Muslim. Just like if you identify with Christianity, you're a Christian. So I just happen to fit the stereotype, and I am both Arab and Muslim. But you don't necessarily have to be both. You can be Muslim without being Arab. You can be Arab without being Muslim. But typically, anytime any sort of issue or conflict arises in the Middle East, I feel that these stereotypes get reaffirmed, and I think that they've been pushed a lot by Western media, especially post 9/11. I think that the Muslim slash Arab community as a whole, even Arab Christians, suffered from a lot of generalized harmful ideologies about who we are or what we represent, especially Muslims, because that's people typically associate Islam with the confused ideas that they have, and I can't blame people for thinking the way that they do necessarily, because I think that Western media does a great job of really negatively depicting us and dehumanizing Muslims and Arabs as a whole. So since all of this has happened, I've got a lot more questions, which is honestly, I've never personally minded it. I know it can be overwhelming for some of my like Muslim peers, but personally, I actually like receiving questions and like having discussions about this kind of thing, because I feel like that's the only way people get to learn. And I'm honestly honored when people come to me and ask me questions because they find me to be a trusted source. So that's one that hasn't necessarily been like a negative impact for me personally. However, on the more negative side, going back to those stereotypes being reaffirmed, I actually recently made the decision to start wearing hijab, which is, for those who don't, it's just the headscarf that I'm wearing right now. And it's basically just a symbol of my devotion to my religion. But obviously, it's also an outward statement that I'm Muslim. So I think, especially following the recent events that have been going on in Palestine, people associate hijab with Islam, and by extension Hamas, and by extension all the things that they've heard in the media about such things. And I've definitely gotten a lot more comments, even like at work and stuff. I do wear hijab. I've gotten comments from my coworkers, from just random people sometimes. Sometimes people are, I think, genuinely just uneducated, and they kind of they just ask blunt questions, kind of just like, you know, are you hiding something under there? Like I've gotten weird questions before, but I've definitely been experiencing a lot more Islamophobia recently, and I feel that this is a pattern that happens every single time something comes up in the Middle East, or you hear something about like a Middle Eastern guy committing any sort of crime. It always comes as backlash to our community. This is
Mhm.
not honestly new for me as a Muslim Arab American in America. In America, this isn't like a new thing, but it definitely takes a toll on your mental health. I feel like for me and for a lot of my friends, we've only really been able to find comfort or confidence within each other and within our own communities, because I think we're heavily misunderstood. And especially with everything that's been going on, it's been very hard to feel like anyone is giving us a platform to voice any sort of perspective, or like what we're dealing with on the receiving end of everything. Obviously, our heart goes out to everyone that's struggling in that region, but on the like Arab American, Muslim American side of it as well, we're also experiencing a lot of backlash, and I feel like it's not really being talked about. Just recently in Vermont, there were three Arab American students that were wearing kufayas, which is like a scarf. It's like a sort of it's a Palestinian cultural symbol. Think of it like that. It's like a scarf. They were wearing it on their shoulders. And they recently got shot by
Oh
a
my
random
gosh.
guy, as always. Yeah, in Vermont recently.
Wow.
There was another hijabi lady, I think, that was beat up so bad that her whole face was bruised up, I think in New Jersey. Like it's not uncommon. I have family friends who are dealing with this kind of backlash as well. So it's scary for sure. It feels harder than normal to outwardly say that you're Arab or that you're Muslim, or let alone, support Palestine. It's been difficult for us to express our identity lately, especially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds really scary. I couldn't imagine like just expressing my opinions about something or expressing like a part of my culture and going outside and like being scared that
Yeah.
people would come hurt me. That sounds like a very difficult way to like go about life. Living in fear is obviously like never fun. So the conflict specifically, like how does it relate to you and why is it something that's very like important to you and important for you to learn about and talk about?
So for me personally, there's two aspects to it. I feel like there's one which is that I'm Arab American, right? And this is it's happening in the Middle East, right? So I naturally have a little bit more context to this than I would say, um your average student, because they don't have family friends that live back there. They don't have family that live back there. You know what I mean? So I have personal affiliation with it. So for me, there's that passion, or there's that more emotional aspect. But
Mhm.
aside from that, even I'm a person that's very vocal on human rights and justice in general. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I will stand up for any group of people that are suffering or being persecuted, or struggling in any sort of way. And I think right now the focus is, I mean, not just on Palestine. There's also things going on in the Congo. There's things happening in Yemen, in Syria. There's conflict, and there's things happening all over the world to all people. And I stand with all of those people. But I think that recently, the reason that that light is sort of being shined on Palestine right now is actually not because this is a new issue. This is something that a lot of people, I think, don't realize. This has been ongoing since 1948, since the creation of the state of Israel, which was in 1948. That's not like my opinion, that's like a historical fact. This is an ongoing, you know, people want to call it a conflict, war, whatever you would like to phrase it as. This has been going on for over 75 years. This did not start on October 7th. So I have that sort of context, because this is not the first time I'm hearing about these attacks, or these things, or this and that, and like this conflict, and Israeli doing this and blah blah blah. I'm not this is not an unfamiliar concept to me. I've been hearing about this since like the day I was born. And the generations before me were probably hearing about this as well. Like my parents grew up in Egypt when Egypt was at war with Israel. This is not a new issue. Um, However, uh, I think like the recent events have sort of triggered more attention towards this particular area, which I think is a good and bad thing. I think good in the sense that it's gotten a lot of people to ask more questions, because I think if you would ask people before to even identify where Palestine was on a map, most people wouldn't even know what you're talking about. So I think it's definitely brought more education to the situation. However, Um, it's also come with a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation and a lot of confusion. But for me, I personally feel passionate about it because aside from my, Arab identity, I stand with all people that are being oppressed or suffering, and I'm kind of, in a way, I'm glad that this is finally getting the attention that it deserves because it's been happening for a while. So I'm happy that people are finally talking about it, finally asking questions, finally questioning their media and this debunking stereotypes. I'm glad people are really getting into the nitty gritty of it now. So the reason that I'm passionate about it is because I've been wanting to people to talk about this for a while. So if I can do anything to contribute to the education and the awareness around these issues, I will more than happily do my part. So that's kind of why I'm active about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And my me at least, I really appreciate you speaking out about this because this was an issue that I'd heard. Like, I knew that there was a conflict, but I didn't know like all of the intricacies of it.
Right.
I didn't know about what was actually going on in Palestine, what they were doing to the Palestinians. And I think it's very important for everybody to kind of like open their eyes, right? And
Right.
realize that's what's going on in the world right now. So
Absolutely.
that this, like, especially recently with like the recent attacks and more media coverage, of course, it's come with some disinformation and stuff like that. How does this actually like harm the movement, and can this disinformation lead to things like Islamophobia, or on the other side of things like anti-Semitism?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is negative rhetoric on both parts. I think that obviously I'm pro Palestine, so there is a sort of like there's a clear stance as to where I am. But from an objective perspective, I can see misinformation coming from both sides in the sense that, um, for example, like on the Palestinian side of it or the Arab side or whatever you'd like to call it, I see a lot of Arabs, even like non-Palestinians, not people in Palestine, even just like Arabs I know personally, and I've had to call them out on this, using the terms Jewish and Zionist interchangeably. And so, for those that don't know, Judaism is the religion. So, if you're Jewish, or it could be an ethnicity as well, but Zionism is the belief in the state of Israel, in the sense that they believe in the creation and maintenance of the state of Israel and that Israel should be there, not Palestine, et cetera, et cetera. Zionism is the movement of the creation of Israel and the creation and maintenance of Israel. That's Zionism. You can be Jewish and not be Zionist. There are plenty of Jewish people that condemn Zionism. And there are Zionists that are not even Jewish. They're not synonymous. So I think it's language is extremely important when addressing issues like this, because if you mix up terms or use things interchangeably, not only will you offend certain groups of people, you're also generalizing certain groups of people. And those communities receive backlash. Like, for example, when I have Arab friends that, so the term, there's the word in Arabic, Yahud, means Jew or Jewish person. But I hear a lot of Arabs saying this word when talking about Israelis or Zionists. And I always have to call them out on it because when translated, it sounds like you're speaking against Jewish people. And then when people join the Palestinian movement or they're pro-Palestine, they somehow end up associating it with like, oh yeah, we hate Jews, or like let's get rid of Jews. That's 100% not the point of the movement. And anyone that uses the Palestine, what's happening to Palestinians or the injustices that are being committed against Palestinians, anyone that uses that as an excuse to promote anti-Semitism is completely missing the mark and does not represent the movement whatsoever. I think if anything, it just ends up creating more division, and people end up, fighting over things that are completely irrelevant, and it just ends up spreading hate. The whole thing that we're fighting for is peace. That's all we want. We want peace for the Palestinian people that have been oppressed, and peace. That's quite literally it. So when you come in with hateful rhetoric towards Jewish people, it has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, and it has the complete opposite intended effect. So I think there's on that end, that's the pattern I'm noticing as far as a rise in anti-Semitism since this has been happening. And I can't personally speak to that experience because I'm not Jewish, and I don't identify with any Jewish identity. But from what I'm observing, I think that's the pattern that's happening. It's mainly a misuse of language, or people that have already been anti-Semitic using this as some kind of excuse to be like, yeah, this is why. And that's 100% not the case. That's not what we're going for. Um, and then on the other end of it, from the side that I can speak to, which is the increase in Islamophobia since all of this has happened, is there's this idea that people associate Palestinians with Islam, and this is a multi-layered thing. First of all, the stuff that's happening to Palestinians in Palestine right now, it's not just happening to Palestinian Muslims, it's happening to Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Jews. It's happening to Palestinians of all religions. It's a Palestine Israel thing. It's not a Jewish Islam thing. And I think that's where people get confused. People start to think it's some kind of religious war, like it's Judaism versus Islam, it's Muslims versus Jews, when that's not the case. It's literally it's a group of occupied indigenous people being occupied by their occupier. If they were not Arab, if they were not majority Muslim, I would still stand with them. It's just like if you look in history of any of the other indigenous people, like the Native Americans, the French Algerian conflict, like these are all groups of people, indigenous people that were being occupied, that had to fight against their oppressors. That's what's happening right now. This is not an Arab issue or like a Muslim issue or a Jewish issue. I think once people take themselves out of that frame, that's when we can all really band together and understand that this is not an issue of religion. This is not a religious war. This is an issue of human rights and civil rights. And I think people don't see it that way, unfortunately. So people think Palestine bad, Islam, Palestine, Islam bad. I think that's quite literally all that goes through people's minds. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric surrounding the Palestinian people, like a lot of the same words that have been used to dehumanize Arabs and Muslims for the last, I don't even know how many years. You have a lot of trigger words like terrorism, barbaric, inhumane, animals, like all of these terminologies have been thrown at us for quite some time. And it's terms that they always use to dehumanize Arabs, and by extension Muslims. Again, I don't know why they group us together, but it's always grouped together. It's like, oh yeah, all you guys over there in the Middle East that we don't understand. So everyone over there is a terrorist, animal, barbaric, inhumane, crazy person that beheads people and blows things up. That's how everyone has viewed it, and that's quite honestly how the media has portrayed us for a very long time. So when people think Palestine, they think Islam, they think crazy, weird, barbaric, inhumane people that behead things. So the narrative gets extremely twisted. We have to understand that Palestinians, Muslim or not, are human beings, just like the rest of us. The kids that are suffering in Palestine right now are just like any other kid living in America with the same kinds of interests, the same kinds of dreams. Actually, dreams that are like much simpler than the kids of America, because those kids are lacking basic necessities. But at their core, they're all human beings, just like the rest of us. They're not barbaric animals. And I think that sort of rhetoric is what makes people so comfortable demonizing, generalizing large groups of people and demonizing them. And when you do that, it makes it very easy to not only group all of the Arabs and Muslims of the entire world, but it also makes it very easy for you to, one, turn a blind eye when bad things are happening to them, and also spread hate without feeling guilty about it. Like those people that are actively attacking people that are expressing either Muslim or Arab identity right now, those people feel justified somehow in their stance. They feel that they associate those evil Palestinians with, evil Muslims and evil Arabs, and somehow they group us all together, and just that's how they, justify it to themselves. So I think the rise in, again, language, super important. When you are describing a group of people, you should be describing them as human beings, not as animals. And I think when you demonize one side entirely, or you dehumanize any population, naturally it leads to a rise in hate towards that group of people. And that's what's been happening on both sides, I think, towards Jewish people and towards Muslims, Arabs, etc.
I think that was very, very well said. And you're so right that a lot of the language that we use matters, especially the way that we label people. Like whether that's based on like different categories that we make for them, or whether that's based on like our perception of them, like how Americans reduce people from the Middle East to like very simple or like derogatory labels, especially following like 9/11. Would you say that social media makes it easier for like this kind of hate and this kind of like misuse of language to happen?
I most definitely, I think social media is a very influential tool. I'll lead with that. I think social media is, it can be very helpful in spreading, I think this is the first, I'll talk about the positive side. I think social media has been good in the sense that um, no genocide in history has ever been this thoroughly documented, if you think about it. It's very impressive to see the general public finally opening their eyes or understanding, at least getting educated on what's going on,
Yeah.
because they have all of this documentation. Now, whether all of that documentation is correct or accurate, that's where the confusion starts to happen.
Yeah.
The negative side of that is that I think social media, there's two things to it. One, people on social media feel way too comfortable because they don't because they don't have to be held accountable for their statements, because they can hide, especially on like troll accounts and things like that. You can just hide, but no one knows who you are, right? So people feel way too comfortable expressing problematic opinions that they more than likely would not say in real life. Um and I'm not saying that those people don't think like that in real life, but it's much harder to spew hate at someone directly in front of you than it is to just hide behind a screen and say whatever you want, because who's even going to hold you accountable for it? So I think that with all of this going on, people on social media don't hesitate to just blow whatever random thought comes to their mind, and then people hop on it, and then facts get twisted, mixed in with opinions, and just either anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or a combination of both, and it gets very mixed up and confusing. I think social media can be harmful in that sense because you, I mean, quite honestly, you're giving random people, you know, in various levels of education on the issue. Everyone has a platform to talk about how they feel about it. So people who don't even really know what they're talking about will hop on and say, spew things a lot of times like they're facts, and you can look it up and it's most of the time not even accurate. But if someone says something confidently enough, you'll find at least some people hopping on what they're saying. And then when those people do it,
Mhm.
other people do it. And again, the movement gets lost. It becomes more about hatred and fighting over dumb facts like where does hummus originate, and which country has better hummus. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just irrelevant points that have nothing to do with anything.
Mhm.
um so I think in that, yeah, can definitely negate the entire point of the movement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So on social media, you mentioned that a lot of people like they get bold on social media, right? Because they know that like their actions are going to have way fewer consequences than in person. How do you think hate on social media and that kind of rhetoric would translate to like in-person hate and like these kind of even these violent instances that you brought up earlier?
I think that, naturally, I think once you've vocalized a point or an opinion enough, um, you not only reaffirm it to yourself, but again, you're reaffirming it to the general people that maybe, whether it's they're watching your stories, or whether you're just messaging people, or you have like a hate Twitter group chat. Like, there's plenty of there's a lot of influence in that. Like, even if it's a stupid statement, even if you're not really thinking about it, I'm not saying that every single person on social media that says a harmful statement even realizes that they're doing it. I think a lot of people are lacking education and context. And so when that happens, I think people really just kind of spew whatever comes to mind. And again, opinions get mixed in, different perspectives get mixed in, and it gets confusing for people, even for the people that are doing it. I'm not saying everyone is like hateful and evil. There are some people that are, but I think a lot of people are just confused and don't know what they're talking about. I feel like when you form these like communities, whether it's, I'm not even joking about the Twitter hate group chats, like when people form these communities of people where they're misinforming each other and negatively influencing each other, or even if it's just reaffirming it to yourself by posting things on your story that you don't understand, or speaking on things that you don't understand, you are making yourself more and more comfortable with those harmful ideologies, and
Mhm.
you end up or not you, but like, in general, people feel more comfortable then projecting those ideas into their real lives and translating it to the people that they see in front of them, whether that be, let's say someone thinks uh Muslims are terrorists. and then they happen to see a hijabi walking across the street, like someone wearing a headscarf, and in their mind they connect, she must be a terrorist, she's those people that I'm talking about, let me attack her. I think that's, it's as simple as that. Human beings are really not that complicated in that sense. Or if I see or if someone sees like the Israeli flag and it has a Star of David on it, and they see a Jewish person wearing a Star of David necklace, but oh, that's that evil Zionist guy, and it's not. So I think people get confused, and when, again, misinformation, lack of education, that's why I think it's very important to really hear people and to really understand what you're talking about before you get on a platform and post or talk or share your opinion. Like for me personally, I post a lot on my stories, but I really prefer to fact check the things that I post and to keep my opinions at least somewhat neutralized on my stories so that I'm not misinforming people or making people think that I'm biased or whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
so that we can prevent these kinds of incidents from happening.
that makes a lot of sense. And I think that you're probably more responsible than most social media users in like fact checking, making sure that you know what you're talking about. I think besides being more like conscientious about what people post, fact checking, checking their sources for bias, all of that, how can people create like a less hateful and more understanding environment?
I feel like the most important thing to do, at least I can speak to, I can speak to my peers or like people that I can associate with, like whether it's I have friends that, don't share the same ideologies as me and vice versa. Um, in that smaller sense, I can speak to how to create a sense of peace or at least respect for one another's beliefs within that kind of community. On a bigger scale, as far as like Israeli government versus Palestinians, a little bit more difficult for me to find a solution for you. But as far as like people our age, like let's say teenagers or people a little bit older, whatever the case may be, just people living in America, I think the most important thing to do is not to dehumanize one another, in the sense that you have to understand that everyone was brought up differently with different experiences. Not everyone shares the same opinions as you, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Whether I necessarily think that that opinion is correct, like I have friends I don't necessarily agree with the way that they think. I don't agree with the side that they support, but that doesn't mean that I then um think that that person is evil or whatever the case may be. I have to look at that person from an objective perspective and say, you know what? I can understand based on, the way that they were raised, maybe the household that they were raised in, the things that they were taught, the experiences that they have, the bias they may have, that they are not inherently an evil, person, but they just see these things differently because their life was different than mine.
Yeah.
And I think when you can leave it at that, it makes it easier for people to just get along, because then you can learn to respect one another's ideologies. However, by all means, if someone is actively, spewing hatred at you, I'm not expecting you to just like find a way to make peace with them and be like, oh, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think, we can maintain decorum. There can be a sense of
Yeah.
politically correctness with one another. It doesn't have to be this like on head fighting all the time, especially because quite honestly, that's not going to get anyone anywhere. Like me going head to head with my Zionist friends, what is that going to, what am I doing for the movement? You know what I mean? What is that going to do for anyone? That's just, again, creating more division, creating more hate. I think the most important thing is to humanize one another and to be able to objectively analyze one another's perspectives, even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't like it. You have, I mean, as an American citizen, you have the right to freedom of speech and to have whatever opinion you want, but that doesn't mean that you should be taking it out on other people. So just respect each other, respect each other's thoughts, and respect each other as human beings. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect way to sum it up. You've been great today. Thank you so much for all of this information, your perspective. You're incredibly well spoken. Just thank you so much for your time and for being here, Yasmin. We're so happy to have you here. For those listening to this episode on the website or on the YouTube channel, we have resources that Yasmin has generously provided us related to the Israel-Palestine conflict linked on our website and in the description of this video whenever we post it. So, Yasmin, thank you so much for being on here and for your time. I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And also, good unbiased news source is NPR. That's another one I forgot to mention. They just report what's going on without, being too propagandic. So that's helpful. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Have a good rest of your night.